The sheriff handed me an eviction notice for my own damn ranch, 200 acres that's been in my family since 1923, and some HOA president claimed it belonged to their community. I'm standing on gravel 3 generations of Hawkins men have walked, staring at papers demanding I vacate in 30 days. The smell of diesel from my cattle truck mixed with morning coffee still warm in my hands. Jennifer Blackwood. Never seen her before, but she claimed my ranch was illegally subdivided from her Willowbrook community land. This was where Sarah and I built our retirement dream, where I scattered her ashes under our oak tree 18 months ago. Ma'am, this land predates your community by 40 years, Jennifer smirked. Not according to our master development agreement. She picked the wrong petroleum engineer. 30 years in oil taught me that desperate grabs hide bigger problems. What would you do if strangers tried to steal your family's legacy? Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? Let me back up and tell you how this mess started. I'm Gerald Hawkins, 58 years old, retired petroleum engineer who thought cattle ranching would be the peaceful chapter of my life. 30 years in the oil fields taught me that pressure builds slowly, then explodes all at once. Wish I'd remembered that lesson. Sarah and I bought this place 15 years ago as our dream retirement sanctuary. 200 acres of Texas hill country where the only sounds were cattle lowing and wind through the oak trees. We spent weekends walking every fence line, planning where we'd build the new barn, talking about grandkids who might visit someday. Then cancer took Sarah 18 months ago. The medical bills ate through our retirement savings faster than drought kills grass. I kept the ranch running on stubbornness and prayer, talking to her photo every morning over coffee. Morning, sweetheart. Cattle look good today. Miss you something fierce. That's when Jennifer Blackwood entered my life like a tornado, wearing designer heels. First time I saw her, she was clicking across my wooden porch in shoes that probably cost more than my monthly feed bill. Perfect blonde hair, power suit, BMW X7 parked next to my beat-up Ford like a spaceship next to a covered wagon. Her perfume hit me before she did, something expensive and sharp that made my cattle uneasy 50 yards away. Mr. Hawkins, I'm Jennifer Blackwood, president of the Willowbrook Homeowners Association. She held out a manicured hand while waving official-looking papers with the other. We need to discuss your property situation. Jennifer had perfected the art of managing new residents, convincing them the community pool was still in the permitting phase and security patrols worked overnight shifts when most people were sleeping. I laughed. Couldn't help it. Ma'am, I don't belong to any HOA. This ranch predates whatever development you're running by decades. Her smile turned cold. That's where you're wrong. According to our master development agreement, your property was illegally subdivided from community land. Under the reversionary clause, it belongs to Willowbrook. Now, reversionary clauses are real legal mechanisms. They mean land automatically returns to the original owner under specific conditions. Translation: if Jennifer's paperwork was legitimate, I could lose everything without a dime of compensation. Lady, my grandfather homesteaded this land in 1923. The only thing reversing here is you, off my property. That's when Jennifer pulled out her phone and dialed 911. Yes, I need police at 1247 County Road 15. Property theft in progress. The suspect is refusing to vacate community land and making threats. 20 minutes later, my friend Deputy Martinez was apologetically serving me court papers. Jennifer stood beside his cruiser looking smug as a cat in a creamery. The lawsuit claimed my ranch violated something called a master development deed restriction. According to these papers, my land was carved out of the original Willowbrook development illegally, and the community had legal right to reclaim it. I touched the rough bark of the oak tree where Sarah and I carved our initials, where I scattered her ashes, where she'd whispered, "Promise me you'll fight for what's right, Gerald, even when it's hard." Looking at those legal papers, I had no idea I was staring at the opening move in a chess game where Jennifer had been stealing from 340 families for 12 years, where she'd embezzled $2.8 million through a completely fake homeowners association. All I knew was that some woman in expensive shoes wanted to take the last piece of Sarah I had left. Jennifer kept checking her phone while explaining how my cattle were damaging community aesthetics. I wondered if there was an app for measuring how offensive a cow looks. But here's what I learned about pressure systems in 30 years of engineering. When someone applies force to steal something, They're usually hiding a bigger problem. Jennifer was about to find out that this old rancher knew a thing or two about pressure and how to use it. 3 days after that first encounter, Jennifer filed an emergency injunction claiming my deed was fraudulent. She presented what looked like official master development plans to the county judge, showing my ranch as community property with neat little lines drawn around it. The local news picked up the story. Property dispute raises questions about land rights. Jennifer positioned herself as the reasonable community leader protecting residents from an unstable rancher. She even tipped off a TV crew to film her standing in front of my cattle gate, pointing at survey markers like she was teaching geography. Then the sheriff served me with a 30-day eviction notice for my own land. I sat at my kitchen table staring at that paper, Sarah's photo looking back at me. The silence felt heavier than usual. Even the cattle seemed to sense something was wrong. Milk production dropped 20% overnight. I called Jake Morrison, the only property lawyer in town I could afford. $5,000 retainer that I definitely didn't have, but my neighbor Bill Martinez co-signed a loan against his tractor. Jake spread Jennifer's paperwork across his desk like he was defusing a bomb. "Gerald, this is either the most sophisticated property fraud I've ever seen, or you're in serious trouble." We spent 6 hours going through every page. Jennifer's documents referenced deed numbers, filing dates, even surveyor signatures. But something felt off. Jake's coffee breath got stronger as he concentrated, and the musty smell of old law books mixed with my growing anxiety. "Look at this," Jake pointed to a deed number. "This should reference the original 1960s subdivision filing." We drove to the county courthouse basement where records older than disco music gathered dust. The clerk, Mrs. Rodriguez, had been filing papers since Nixon was president. She knew every book, every filing system, every way to hide or find documents. "Deed number 1965-0847, she shook her gray head. "Honey, that number was never assigned. Our filing system skipped from 0846 to 0848 because of a clerical error. Been that way for 60 years. Property deeds have unique recording numbers linked to specific dates and locations. Every real deed leaves a paper trail through county records. Translation: fake deeds reference numbers that never existed, and Jennifer's paperwork was pointing to a ghost." Jake and I pulled the original 1960s subdivision plat maps. The yellow pages cracked like autumn leaves as we unfolded them on the research table. There it was, clear as sunrise. Willowbrook development was plotted around existing properties, including mine. My family's ranch had been there 40 years before Jennifer's community existed. I found Sarah's handwritten property notes that night, tucked in our old survey folder. Her careful script documenting every fence post, every boundary marker, every tree we'd planted together. "Gerald, always trust the paperwork, but verify the people behind it." Even in death, she was still teaching me. Jennifer's master development agreement had more typos than a middle school book report. Apparently, fraud doesn't require spell check, but her biggest mistake was claiming authority she never had. The next morning, I called Jake with new confidence. "File a motion to dismiss, and while you're at it, request sanctions for frivolous litigation." But Jennifer wasn't backing down. If anything, my questions made her more desperate. She filed a motion claiming I was mentally unstable due to grief, that losing Sarah had made me delusional about property ownership. That crossed a line. I sat under the oak tree where Sarah rests, county records spread around me like evidence in a murder case. The late afternoon sun slanted through leaves that had watched my family work this land for a century. "Sweetheart, this woman thinks your death broke my mind. She's about to learn what a petroleum engineer with 30 years of pressure analysis can do when he sets his mind to something." The mini twist came when I started digging deeper into Jennifer's background. Turns out her Willowbrook Homeowners Association wasn't registered with the state. No corporate charter, no legal standing, no authority to claim anything. Jennifer had been playing with fake papers from the beginning. But while I was building my defense, Jennifer was escalating the attack. She convinced the judge to grant a temporary restraining order, claiming my aggressive behavior threatened community safety. I got locked out of half my own ranch. The restraining order meant I couldn't access my eastern 100 acres. That's where my water well was located, along with the equipment barn and 50 head of cattle. Jennifer's lawyer handed me the court order with all the warmth of a tax notice. "Mr. Hawkins, you're prohibited from entering the disputed area pending resolution of ownership claims." I stood there watching my cattle press against the fence, confused about why they couldn't reach water. The metallic clang of the locked gate echoed across empty pasture where 3 generations of my family had worked the land. "This is my property," I told the deputy supervising the lockout. "Not according to the judge, sir. Sorry." 50 head of cattle needed boarding at $200 per day. Bill Martinez took them temporarily, but I was bleeding money I didn't have for livestock that belonged on my own land. That's when I hired Dr. Patricia Wise, a forensic document examiner from Austin. Jennifer's evidence needed professional analysis, and my engineering brain suspected her survey maps weren't what they seemed. Dr. Wise spread Jennifer's documents under specialized lighting equipment that revealed details invisible to normal examination. "Mr. Hawkins, whoever created these maps doesn't understand how GPS coordinates work. Digital forensics on supposedly historical documents can reveal when files were actually created and modified. Even if someone changes the creation date, metadata leaves fingerprints that experts can read." Translation: Jennifer's historical survey maps were actually made last Tuesday on her home computer. "Look at this GPS coordinate." Dr. Wise pointed to Jennifer's 1960s survey map. "This reference point uses satellite positioning data that wasn't available until 1995. Also, the original surveyor's signature is copy-pasted from 3 different documents. Document forgery leaves traces like footprints in mud. The signature analysis showed identical pen pressure patterns that only occur when copying images, not signing actual papers. Jennifer had been cutting and pasting her way to property fraud. I installed trail cameras around the disputed fence line, hidden in fence posts and trees. If Jennifer's people were trespassing to manufacture evidence, I wanted documentation. 3 neighboring ranchers started calling with similar stories. Tom Bradley owned 60 acres adjacent to mine. Same lawsuit, same claims about illegal subdivision, same Jennifer Blackwood demanding property surrender. Bill Martinez got served papers claiming his family's land from the 1940s somehow belonged to Willowbrook. Even old Pete Garrison, whose ranch had been there since before the county was officially organized. We met at Bill's kitchen table, 4 ranchers trying to understand how some woman with fresh manicures could threaten land that predated her by decades. "She offered me $50,000 to sell out quietly," Tom said. "When I laughed, she threatened to sue me into bankruptcy." The pattern was becoming clear. Jennifer wasn't just targeting me. She was systematically attacking rural property owners around her development. My trail cameras captured Jennifer's crew digging survey stakes on my property at 2 in the morning. They were planting evidence to support their fake boundary claims. I called Jake with the footage. "We've got them trespassing and tampering with property markers." "Gerald, this is bigger than a simple boundary dispute. Jennifer's running some kind of systematic land grab operation." That night, I found Sarah's garden journal where she documented every tree, fence post, and landmark on our property. Her detailed notes from 2008 through 2020 showed exact locations of everything Jennifer claimed was community property. Sarah's careful documentation was becoming my legal ammunition. The mini twist came when Jennifer filed a motion claiming I'd threatened her workers. She presented security footage showing my truck near the disputed fence line in an aggressive manner. But Dr. Wise's analysis proved the timestamp on Jennifer's security footage had been digitally altered. The shadows in the video didn't match the claimed date and time. More importantly, my GPS tracking from the truck showed I was at the feed store during the alleged incident. Jennifer was doctoring evidence faster than I could debunk it. The restraining order got extended another 30 days. Judge Patterson was either convinced by Jennifer's evidence or intimidated by her expensive lawyers. I sat under Sarah's oak tree, holding her journal, watching sunset over land I might lose despite owning it fair and square. "Sweetheart, this woman's not just stealing our ranch. She's stealing from families all over the county. I think it's time to stop playing defense." But Jennifer's next move would reveal just how desperate she'd become, and how far she'd go to cover up what I was starting to suspect was a much larger crime. Jennifer's desperation led her to attack my family's history directly. She filed a court motion claiming my grandfather had stolen land from the original development company through fraudulent homestead claims. The paperwork alleged that generational property fraud invalidated my family's century of ownership. According to Jennifer's latest fiction, the Hawkins family had been squatting on community land since 1923. Judge Patterson froze my bank accounts pending investigation of generational fraud claims. I couldn't access $15,000 in checking or $40,000 in savings, money I needed for cattle feed, equipment repairs, and legal fees. The bank called in my equipment loan, threatening foreclosure on the tractor Sarah and I bought for retirement farming. The regional newspaper picked up Jennifer's story. Local rancher's family built fortune on stolen land. Suddenly, I wasn't just fighting for my property. I was defending my grandfather's honor and my family's reputation. I spent that weekend in my attic, going through grandmother's old trunk that hadn't been opened since her funeral. The scent of cedar and old paper filled the cramped space as I searched for any documentation of our original land claim. At the bottom of the trunk, wrapped in yellowed cloth, I found it. Grandfather's original homestead filing papers from 1923. Handwritten application to the government land office, complete with required fee payment and surveyor's report. But more importantly, I found grandmother's photograph collection. Pictures from the 1930s showing our ranch buildings in their exact current locations, 40 years before Jennifer's development existed. Chain of title documentation traces property ownership back to original government land grants. An unbroken ownership record for 100 years beats any developer's claims from 1960. Translation: when the government gave your family land directly, no private company can claim they owned it first. I drove to the county courthouse basement with grandmother's documents and Jake's increasing excitement. Mrs. Rodriguez helped us trace the property chain back to the original Texas land grant. Your grandfather filed this properly in 1923, she confirmed. Government land grant number 1923 TX4471. That land was never owned by any private development company. Jennifer's latest court filing claimed inheritance rights from Willowbrook Development Corporation, supposedly the original owner of my family's land, but the corporation records told a different story. Willowbrook Development Corporation existed for exactly 6 months in 1965, dissolved by the state for fraudulent business practices, never owned any land, never filed any development plans, never had legal standing to claim property. Jennifer was claiming inheritance rights from a company that had been shut down for fraud. Jake filed an emergency motion with this evidence, requesting immediate dismissal of all claims and sanctions against Jennifer for frivolous litigation. But Jennifer's response revealed just how dangerous cornered criminals become. She filed criminal charges against me, claiming I'd threatened her children at their elementary school, presented security footage showing my truck in the school parking lot during pickup time. Gerald Hawkins has escalated to stalking behavior, her statement read. My family fears for our safety due to his increasingly unstable actions. I was looking at potential felony stalking charges that could send me to prison. The sheriff arrived at dawn to arrest me. Deputy Martinez looked sick as he read the warrant. Gerald, I don't believe this, but I have to follow the law. Jake posted bail using the ranch as collateral. If I lost this case, Jennifer would get my property through criminal forfeiture instead of civil court. That's when I made the call that changed everything. My engineer buddy Tom Richards had mentioned his daughter worked for the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit in Dallas. I'd never imagined needing federal law enforcement, but Jennifer's systematic targeting of multiple families was starting to look like organized crime. Special Agent Maria Santos agreed to meet me at a truck stop outside town. Professional, sharp-eyed, with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from putting white-collar criminals in federal prison. Mr. Hawkins, what you're describing sounds like systematic fraud using fake legal claims. If she's targeting multiple property owners with fabricated evidence, that crosses into federal racketeering territory. I handed her copies of everything: forged documents, altered security footage, bank records showing Jennifer's unusual legal expenses, contact information for the other targeted ranchers. Give me 2 weeks to investigate Jennifer's background, Agent Santos said. Don't confront her directly. Let her think she's winning while we build the federal case. The mini-twist was discovering that Jennifer's elementary school footage was digitally altered, timestamp manipulation that FBI forensics could prove within hours. But more importantly, Agent Santos found something I'd missed. Jennifer's Homeowners Association was collecting monthly fees from 340 families for services that didn't exist. This wasn't just property fraud. This was a multi-million-dollar embezzlement operation disguised as community management. Agent Santos called me 3 days later with news that changed everything. Gerald, Jennifer Blackwood has been running a sophisticated financial fraud operation for 12 years. She's collected $2.8 million from families in what they think is a legitimate homeowners association. I sat in my truck outside the feed store trying to process numbers that didn't make sense. $2.8 million from how many families? 340 homes paying $850 per month for community services that don't exist. Pool maintenance for a pool that was never built. Security patrols that were never hired. Legal funds that went straight to her personal accounts. The FBI forensic accountants had traced Jennifer's money flow like following a river to its source. Monthly HOA fees from hundreds of families flowed into accounts Jennifer controlled, then immediately transferred to her personal banking. What services were families supposed to get? I asked. Community pool, landscaping, 24/7 security, legal representation, road maintenance. None of it exists. Jennifer pocketed everything while providing nothing. Fiduciary duty means managing other people's money for their benefit, not your own. Taking community fees for fake services is felony theft, even if people voluntarily paid. Translation: Jennifer had been stealing from hundreds of families who trusted her to manage their community. The property lawsuits are just a distraction, Agent Santos explained. Jennifer targets rural landowners near her development to legitimize her fake HOA claims. If she can prove the association has authority over surrounding properties, it validates her fictional community management role. My ranch wasn't the target, it was the cover story. Jennifer needed to establish legal authority over rural properties to justify collecting fees from suburban families for non-existent services. How long has this been going on? 12 years. Started small with maybe 50 families, grew as new houses were built. Jennifer's been stealing roughly $230,000 per year in community fees. I drove to the oak tree where Sarah rests, trying to wrap my head around the scale of Jennifer's crime. 340 families had been sending her money every month for a decade, trusting her to maintain their community while she provided absolutely nothing. Sarah, this isn't about our ranch anymore. This woman's been stealing from neighbors who think they're paying for legitimate services. Kids swimming in pools that don't exist, families expecting security that was never hired. The FBI had Jennifer's banking records, email communications, and documentation proving systematic fraud, but they needed more time to build an airtight federal case. The annual Homeowners Association meeting is in 10 days, Agent Santos told me. Jennifer has to present financial reports and justify another year of fee increases. That's our opportunity. What do you need from me? Keep playing defense. Let her think she's winning the property dispute. We'll coordinate with local law enforcement for arrests during the meeting when we have maximum witnesses and media presence. Agent Santos explained Jennifer's business model like a criminal engineering project. Create fake community authority, collect monthly fees for fictional services, use property lawsuits to establish legitimacy, transfer money to personal accounts, repeat. She's done this in 3 other counties, Agent Santos revealed. Always the same pattern. Target rural properties, claim community authority, collect fees for services never provided. Jennifer's built a criminal enterprise disguised as Suburban Homeowners Association. I understood now why Jennifer fought so hard for my ranch. Without authority over surrounding rural properties, her fake HOA lost credibility with the families she was robbing. Gerald, in 10 days, Jennifer's going to face 340 families who've been paying for services that don't exist. Federal agents will be waiting to arrest her for wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering. The power dynamic had completely shifted. I wasn't defending my property anymore. I was helping federal agents take down a criminal who'd stolen millions from hardworking families. Time to give Jennifer the annual meeting she'd never forget. Agent Santos met me at the ranch the next morning to coordinate our federal trap. The annual Willowbrook HOA meeting would happen in the community center Jennifer had built with stolen money. Perfect irony for her downfall. We need this meeting recorded for federal evidence, she explained while examining the community center layout. Texas one-party consent law allows recording your own conversations, so everything Jennifer says will be admissible in court. My engineer buddy Tom Richards installed hidden recording equipment throughout the meeting room. 4K cameras with cloud backup, audio recording devices that could capture whispers from 50 feet away. Federal standards require redundant documentation to prevent evidence challenges. Agent Santos explained they needed Jennifer to present false financial reports publicly for maximum evidence documentation and to prevent successful appeals later. If technology fails, we still need witnesses, Agent Santos said. How many families do you think will attend? Jennifer sent notices requiring attendance for critical community votes. She's expecting 300 people minimum. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit had spent 2 weeks building an airtight case. Wire fraud, money laundering, racketeering, charges that carried 20 years in federal prison. But they needed Jennifer to incriminate herself publicly with maximum witnesses present. I calculated Jennifer's theft like an engineering problem. $850 per month from 340 homes equals $289,000 annually. Over 12 years, that totaled $3.4 million in stolen fees, not counting fake legal expenses and property damage costs. Each family lost an average of $9,800, I told Agent Santos. That's vacation money, college savings, retirement funds stolen for services that never existed. Wire fraud prosecution requires proof of interstate electronic communication for fraudulent purposes. Jennifer's email notifications about fee increases, banking transfers across state lines, and digital payment systems created perfect federal evidence trail. Translation: every email Jennifer sent about fake services added years to her potential prison sentence. Agent Santos coordinated with 3 other FBI offices investigating Jennifer's criminal network. She's run similar schemes in Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. Always the same pattern: fake HOA authority, non-existent services, systematic theft from trusting families. We spent hours preparing questions that would force Jennifer to incriminate herself. How many years had she managed the community? What services justified fee increases? Where were the promised amenities? How much money remained in community accounts? The key is making her defend the indefensible, Agent Santos explained. When 340 families simultaneously realize they've been robbed, Jennifer will either confess or dig herself deeper with more lies. I visited neighbors door to door that week, building community awareness without revealing the federal investigation. Bill Martinez helped coordinate with other rural property owners Jennifer had targeted. Gerald, if she's been stealing from suburban families, that explains why she needs our land, Tom Bradley realized. Rural property ownership legitimizes her fake community authority. Betty Lucy, a retired teacher, organized telephone trees to ensure maximum meeting attendance. Every family deserves to know where their money went, she said while making her 4th pot of coffee for neighbor coordination meetings. RICO prosecution targets criminal enterprises using patterns of illegal activity across multiple victims. Jennifer's systematic fraud against hundreds of families qualified for federal racketeering charges carrying 20 years prison. Translation: the more families Jennifer stole from, the longer she'd spend behind bars. We documented every fake service Jennifer had promised: community pool that was never built, security patrols that were never hired, landscaping maintenance residents did themselves, legal representation that only benefited Jennifer. The landscaping alone should have cost $60,000 annually, I calculated. Security services she charged for would cost $80,000. Pool maintenance for a non-existent pool, another $40,000 yearly. Agent Santos reviewed my documentation with FBI accountants. Jennifer's theft rate exceeded legitimate service costs by 90%. She was basically charging families for fantasy amenities while providing nothing. The media strategy involved investigative reporters from Dallas Morning News who'd been tracking HOA fraud statewide. Anonymous tip about major embezzlement arrest during community meeting, Agent Santos explained. 3 days before the meeting, I sat under Sarah's oak tree preparing emotionally for confronting Jennifer publicly. Sweetheart, tomorrow I help take down a criminal who's stolen from hundreds of families. This isn't about our ranch anymore. It's about justice for everyone she's hurt. The evening before the meeting, Agent Santos called with final coordination details. Federal agents will be positioned outside the community center. When Jennifer presents her fraudulent financial reports, you'll ask questions that force her to confess publicly. We'll enter when she's completely incriminated herself. What if she tries to run? She won't. Jennifer's arrogance is her weakness. She genuinely believes she's smarter than everyone else. That pride will put her in federal prison. I checked the hidden recording equipment one last time, tasting the metallic flavor of adrenaline. Tomorrow, 340 families would learn they'd been robbed by the woman they trusted to manage their community. Jennifer was about to discover that stealing from hardworking families carries a price higher than she ever imagined. The week before the annual meeting, Jennifer's desperation reached criminal levels. She attempted to bribe County Clerk Tom Bradley with $25,000 to backdate false property records supporting her land claims. Unfortunately for Jennifer, my hidden cameras captured the entire bribery attempt in the county office. "Tom, I need these survey records to show my dates from 1963 instead of 1965, Jennifer said while sliding an envelope across his desk. That money should handle any filing fees. Tom Bradley had been taking bribes for 8 years, but he never expected federal surveillance. Agent Santos had been monitoring Jennifer's phone calls and financial transactions for weeks, building evidence of systematic corruption. Bribing public officials violates federal law under Title 18 U.S.C. 201. Even attempting to corrupt government records is a felony carrying 15 years in prison. Translation: Jennifer's $25,000 bribery attempt just added another decade to her potential sentence. The FBI discovered that Jennifer had paid Bradley over $150,000 during the past 8 years for falsified property records targeting elderly rural landowners. She's been running systematic land acquisition schemes, Agent Santos revealed. Fake surveys, backdated deeds, corrupted public records, all designed to steal property from families who can't afford to fight expensive legal battles. Jennifer's criminal network was bigger than anyone realized, but her biggest mistake was trying to bribe my attorney Jake Morrison. Jake called me Thursday morning, voice shaking with anger. "Gerald, Jennifer just offered me $50,000 to withdraw as your counsel and recommend you settle her property claims. Please tell me you recorded that conversation." "Every word. She said fighting federal investigations was expensive and $50,000 would be easier than watching you lose everything in court." Obstruction of justice through bribery or intimidation is a separate felony that adds 10 years to federal sentences. Jennifer's attempt to corrupt my legal representation while under FBI investigation showed criminal consciousness of guilt. Translation: Every desperate move Jennifer made to stop our investigation created more evidence for her prosecution. Agent Santos was ecstatic when Jake delivered the bribery recording. Jennifer just confessed that she's aware of federal investigation and actively attempting to obstruct justice. Federal judges hate defendants who try to corrupt the legal process. Jennifer's panic accelerated her mistakes. She started moving money to offshore accounts, trying to hide stolen funds before federal asset seizure. But international banking transfers create permanent digital evidence that FBI financial crimes units track routinely. She moved $400,000 to a Cayman Islands account Tuesday, Agent Santos reported. Money laundering adds another 20 years to her sentence. Jennifer's making our prosecution easier with every desperate move. Friday afternoon, Jennifer filed criminal charges claiming I'd threatened her children at their elementary school. She presented security footage showing my truck in the school parking lot during pickup time, claiming stalking behavior that endangers my family. But FBI digital forensics proved the timestamp on Jennifer's footage had been altered. The shadows in her video didn't match the claimed date and time. More damaging, GPS tracking from my truck showed I was at the veterinarian's office during the alleged incident. Jennifer had digitally manufactured evidence of criminal behavior, federal evidence tampering that carries 8 years imprisonment. She's becoming sloppy under pressure, Agent Santos observed. Criminals often self-destruct when federal investigations close in. Jennifer's creating evidence of her guilt faster than we can process it. The mini twist came when County Clerk Bradley decided to cooperate with federal authorities rather than face corruption charges alongside Jennifer. Bradley's testimony reveals 8 years of systematic record falsification, Agent Santos explained. Jennifer paid him to backdate surveys, alter property filings, and create false deed records targeting dozens of rural property owners. Bradley's cooperation gave federal prosecutors evidence of Jennifer's criminal enterprise spanning multiple counties and hundreds of victims. But Jennifer wasn't finished destroying herself. Saturday evening, she hired private investigators to follow me and document threatening behavior toward community families. The investigators she chose turned out to be former law enforcement officers who immediately recognized federal surveillance and reported Jennifer's witness intimidation attempts to the FBI. Jennifer just committed witness intimidation, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to interfere with federal investigation, Agent Santos said with barely contained excitement. She's built a federal racketeering case against herself. Sunday morning, Jennifer made her final mistake. She called a meeting of her executive committee to coordinate false testimony for the annual meeting. Unfortunately for her, FBI wiretaps recorded her instructing committee members to lie under oath about community finances and services. Tomorrow night, Jennifer will face 340 families she's robbed for 12 years, Agent Santos said. She'll try to present false financial reports while federal agents record every word. When she's finished incriminating herself publicly, federal marshals will arrest her for the longest white-collar crime sentence in county history. I sat under Sarah's oak tree that evening, grateful for the strength to see justice through. Tomorrow, Jennifer Blackwood would discover that stealing from hardworking families carries consequences she never imagined. Jennifer's final desperate gambit came Sunday night, 18 hours before the annual meeting. She filed emergency criminal charges, claiming I'd threatened her family with domestic terrorism tactics, requesting immediate arrest to prevent my attendance at the community gathering. According to her sworn statement, I'd hired militia groups to intimidate HOA residents and had made threats involving explosive devices related to my petroleum engineering background. Sheriff Martinez called me at 5 a.m. Monday morning. "Gerald, I got federal agents at my office and a judge demanding your immediate arrest for terrorism charges. This is getting way out of hand." "Tom, you've known me 20 years. Do I seem like someone who threatens children?" "Not for a minute, but Jennifer's got videos, witness statements, and claims you're planning violence during tonight's meeting." Agent Santos arrived at the ranch before breakfast, bringing FBI domestic terrorism investigators to examine Jennifer's claims. "Gerald, false terrorism reports trigger Department of Homeland Security investigations automatically. Jennifer just involved federal anti-terrorism units in her fraud case. Filing false terrorism reports wastes federal resources and violates post-9/11 security laws carrying 8 years imprisonment." Jennifer's fake militia accusations triggered multi-agency investigations that cost taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars. Translation: Jennifer's desperate lies just added domestic terrorism charges to her already massive federal sentence. The FBI examined Jennifer's evidence of my terrorist planning: altered phone recordings, digitally manipulated photographs, and witness statements from people who'd never met me. "Every piece of evidence is fabricated," Agent Santos confirmed after 6 hours of forensic analysis. "Digital timestamps prove these recordings were edited last night. GPS metadata shows these photographs were taken at locations you've never visited." Jennifer's criminal desperation had reached a level that federal prosecutors rarely encountered: systematic evidence fabrication across multiple felony charges while under active federal investigation. She's committed evidence tampering, false reporting, witness intimidation, obstruction of justice, and now false terrorism charges, Agent Santos cataloged. Jennifer's facing 40 to 50 years in federal prison, but Judge Patterson still issued an emergency protective order based on Jennifer's terrorism claims, threatening my arrest if I attended the annual meeting. That's when Agent Santos revealed the federal investigation's final card. "Gerald, we've been monitoring Jennifer's communications for 6 weeks under federal wiretap authority. Last night, she instructed her committee members to provide false testimony about community finances during tonight's meeting. FBI recordings captured Jennifer explicitly coaching witnesses to lie under oath about services that didn't exist and money that had been stolen. That's conspiracy to commit perjury, witness tampering, and continued fraud while under investigation," Agent Santos explained. Jennifer just guaranteed herself maximum federal sentencing. The mini-twist came when Jennifer's own committee members contacted federal agents to report her attempted perjury conspiracy. "Betty Morrison, the community treasurer, called us this morning," Agent Santos revealed. Jennifer instructed her to present falsified financial records showing community money spent on services that were never provided. Betty's been keeping real records for 3 years, documenting Jennifer's systematic theft. Jennifer's inner circle was abandoning her faster than rats leaving a sinking ship. Monday afternoon, Jennifer made one final catastrophic error. She attempted to withdraw the remaining community funds, over $200,000, claiming legal expenses for defending against terrorist threats. But federal asset seizure orders had frozen all accounts connected to Jennifer's fraud investigation. "The bank called us when Jennifer tried to empty community accounts," Agent Santos said. "Attempting to steal evidence while under federal investigation is obstruction of justice carrying 10 additional years imprisonment." At 4 p.m., Judge Patterson dismissed Jennifer's terrorism charges after FBI evidence proved every accusation was fabricated. Ms. Blackwood, filing false criminal reports while under federal investigation demonstrates consciousness of guilt that undermines all your credibility. The protective order was lifted, clearing my attendance at the evening meeting. Agent Santos positioned federal agents around the community center like pieces on a chessboard. Jennifer doesn't know her committee members are cooperating with federal authorities. She'll expect support for her false testimony, but instead she'll face public contradiction from her own treasurer. 6 news crews were already setting up cameras outside the community center, attracted by anonymous tips about major federal arrests at local homeowners meeting. Jennifer's arrogance will be her final downfall, Agent Santos predicted. She genuinely believes she can lie her way out of federal charges in front of 340 families she's been robbing for 12 years. I sat in my truck outside the community center at 6:30, watching Jennifer arrive in her white BMW with the confidence of someone who thought she controlled the narrative. In 30 minutes, she'd face the families she'd stolen from for over a decade. Federal agents were waiting to arrest her for crimes that would send her to prison for the rest of her life. Sarah's voice whispered in the evening air, "Gerald, justice is coming. Make it count." Time to end Jennifer Blackwood's criminal career forever. The Willowbrook Community Center was packed beyond capacity. 340 families filled every chair, lined the walls, and spilled into the hallway. News crews positioned cameras at all exits, while federal agents took discreet positions throughout the crowd. Jennifer walked to the podium at 7 p.m. wearing her most expensive power suit, radiating the confidence of someone who believed she controlled everyone in the room. "Welcome to our annual Homeowners Association meeting," she began with practiced authority. "Tonight we'll review community finances, discuss necessary fee increases, and address security concerns raised by recent events." The room buzzed with nervous energy. Families whispered about property disputes, rising costs, and rumors of federal investigations. Jennifer smiled like a queen addressing her subjects. "Our first order of business involves removing Gerald Hawkins from community membership due to property violations and threatening behavior toward residents." I stood up from the back row. "Point of order, Jennifer. I'd like to address these accusations directly." Jennifer's smile turned predatory. "Gerald has no standing in this proceeding because his property doesn't belong to him. Under our community covenants, disputed properties have no voting rights." Perfect. She'd just claimed my ranch belonged to her HOA in front of 340 witnesses and 6 news cameras. "Jennifer, that's an interesting claim," I said, walking toward the front of the room. "Could you show these families where their $850 per month actually goes?" "Our community fees fund essential services that maintain property values," Jennifer replied smoothly. "Pool maintenance, security patrols, landscaping, legal representation." "What's the address of our community pool?" I asked. Confused silence filled the room. Families looked around as if noticing for the first time that no community pool existed anywhere in their development. "The pool is in planning stages," Jennifer recovered quickly. "Engineering studies and permit applications require advance funding." "For 12 years?" I pressed. "Where exactly are these security patrols you've been charging for?" More silence. Families were beginning to realize they'd never seen security guards anywhere in their neighborhood. Agent Santos had given me a remote control for the projection screen behind Jennifer's podium. I clicked it on, displaying the first slide of evidence. "Jennifer, here are bank records showing $850 per month from each family flowing directly into your personal accounts for the past 12 years. The screen showed digital bank statements with Jennifer's name on accounts receiving millions in community fees. Mathematical calculations displayed the theft in real time. 850 times 340 times 12 equals $3.4 million stolen. The room erupted. Families shouted questions, demanded explanations, and realized simultaneously that they'd been robbed by the woman they trusted to manage their community. "These documents are forgeries created by Gerald to frame me," Jennifer shouted over the growing chaos. "Actually, they're not." Betty Morrison, the community treasurer, stood up with her own documentation. "I've been keeping real financial records for 3 years. Jennifer instructed me this morning to present false reports hiding her theft." The crowd turned toward Betty with desperate attention. "Jennifer hasn't spent $1 on community services in 3 years. I've been tracking expenses. No pool maintenance because there's no pool. No security because she never hired anyone. No landscaping because residents maintain their own properties." Agent Santos entered through the main door, followed by 6 federal agents with badges clearly visible. Since my ranch predated the subdivision by 40 years, state law recognized me as an adjacent property owner with legal standing in community governance matters. "Jennifer Blackwood," Agent Santos announced in a voice that silenced the room completely. "You're under arrest for wire fraud, racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the silent community center as 340 families watched their tormentor led away in disgrace. "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Jennifer's face transformed from confident authority to shocked disbelief as the federal charges were read aloud. Wire fraud, money laundering, racketeering, bribery, obstruction of justice, evidence tampering. "Jennifer, my ranch was never yours because your HOA never legally existed," I said as agents led her past my position. "You created a fake community to steal $2.8 million from these families. The FBI has been investigating you for months." 6 news cameras captured every moment as Jennifer was escorted to federal vehicles outside. The evening broadcasts would lead with "Fake HOA President Arrested for Multi-million-dollar Fraud." Federal agents immediately began documenting victim statements and financial losses. Asset seizure orders froze Jennifer's accounts, luxury cars, and properties to fund victim restitution. The families sat in stunned silence, processing 12 years of systematic theft by someone they'd trusted completely. "Folks," I addressed the room as Agent Santos finished arrest procedures, "Jennifer's criminal trial will recover most of your stolen money through federal asset forfeiture. In the meantime, we need to form a legitimate homeowners association with transparent financial oversight." 340 hands shot up to volunteer for community rebuilding. Justice served. Criminals arrested. Community healing begins tonight. After federal agents led Jennifer away in handcuffs, the community center fell into stunned silence for exactly 5 seconds before erupting in applause and desperate questions. Betty Morrison, the community treasurer, stood up first. "We can't let this community collapse after what we just learned. We need a new board of directors, right now." Over 300 hands shot up simultaneously. Someone called for emergency elections under HOA bylaws, allowing removal of officers by majority vote under special circumstances. "Wait!" called out Tom Lucy, a retired teacher. "Can we even trust any of the current board? How do we know who else was involved?" The room buzzed with nervous energy. Families who'd just discovered 12 years of theft weren't sure who to trust. "I nominate Gerald Hawkins for emergency president," Betty announced. "He's the one who exposed this fraud and saved all of us from Jennifer's theft." "But his ranch isn't even part of our HOA," someone protested. Agent Santos, still documenting evidence, looked up from her paperwork. "Actually, since Mr. Hawkins' property predates your subdivision and he's been instrumental in exposing systematic fraud affecting your community, state law recognizes him as an adjacent property owner with legal standing." I hadn't even sat down when voices throughout the room started seconding the nomination. "Mr. Hawkins saved all of us from 12 years of fraud. He's the only one who fought Jennifer when the rest of us just paid our fees. We need someone we can trust." The vote happened on the spot. 338 votes in favor, 2 abstentions. Betty Morrison handed me Jennifer's abandoned gavel with tears in her eyes. "Gerald, this community is yours to heal." 1 meeting later, I officially controlled the Willowbrook HOA, not for revenge, but to transform it into a truly transparent and legitimate community organization that actually served the families who'd trusted us with their money. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jennifer had spent months trying to steal my ranch through fake legal claims. Instead, her own criminal behavior had handed me control of the very organization she'd used to defraud hundreds of families. Justice served, community protected, leadership earned through truth instead of theft. Within 48 hours as the new HOA president, I'd implemented emergency financial controls and transparency measures that Jennifer had avoided for 12 years. Our first official act was dissolving all of her fraudulent contracts and establishing legitimate community services. Federal Judge Martinez dismissed all property claims against my ranch with prejudice, meaning Jennifer could never file similar lawsuits again. The court awarded me $75,000 in attorney fees and damages, finally compensating the financial devastation she'd caused my family. Jennifer's federal indictment listed 47 felony counts, including racketeering, wire fraud, money laundering, bribery, obstruction of justice, and evidence tampering. Federal prosecutors offered a plea bargain, 28 years in federal prison with cooperation in asset recovery, or 35 years after trial conviction. Jennifer chose the plea bargain. Federal asset forfeiture recovered $2.1 million from Jennifer's hidden accounts, luxury cars, jewelry, and properties. Each of the 340 families received an average of $6,200 in restitution, Not everything they'd lost, but substantial recovery from their stolen fees. Her $750,000 house was sold to fund additional victim compensation. The civil lawsuit our attorney filed seeks punitive damages for emotional distress and community rebuilding costs. Under my leadership, Willowbrook became the first HOA in county history with completely transparent finances. We legally incorporated with state oversight, established term limits, and implemented monthly financial reporting that every resident could access online. For the first time in 12 years, families actually received the services they paid for: professional landscaping, legitimate security patrols, and legal representation for actual community issues instead of fraudulent property theft. The Sarah Hawkins Community Integrity Fund was established with $50,000 from my settlement money. This memorial endowment provides legal aid for rural families facing HOA fraud, while honoring my wife's memory through protection of honest, hardworking people. We've already helped 3 families in neighboring counties fight similar fake HOA schemes. The fund also provides an annual $10,000 scholarship for agricultural engineering students, ensuring future generations understand both rural land rights and the technical skills needed to defend them. Every December, our community holds the Sarah Hawkins Memorial Day celebration, combining remembrance of her life with gratitude for justice achieved through her inspiration. Federal restitution laws guarantee victim repayment from criminal proceedings. Jennifer must repay every stolen penny before becoming eligible for parole. Translation: she'll spend at least 14 years in federal prison before any possibility of reduced sentences. 6 months after Jennifer's sentencing, Netflix purchased documentary rights to our story for a true crime series called Fake HOA Real Justice. A major publisher offered me a $150,000 advance for a memoir about fighting systematic fraud. I've been invited to speak at rural property rights conferences across Texas, helping other landowners recognize and prevent HOA fraud schemes. The story influenced state legislation requiring HOA registration, financial auditing, and criminal background checks for community management positions. Agent Santos called last week with news that Jennifer's fraud network spanned 4 states. FBI task forces discovered 12 additional fake HOAs she'd operated in Texas and Oklahoma, stealing from over 800 families total. Congressional hearings on HOA regulation cited our case as evidence for federal oversight of community management organizations. My ranch has never been more productive. The settlement money funded new irrigation systems, equipment upgrades, and herd expansion from 50 to 120 cattle. For the first time since Sarah's illness, the operation shows consistent profit. More importantly, I found peace. The evening conversations with Sarah's memory have transformed from desperate grief to grateful remembrance. Our fight for justice honored her values while protecting hundreds of innocent families. Betty Morrison and I married last spring under the oak tree where Sarah rests. Sarah's garden journal provided the foundation for landscape design that celebrates both women who've blessed my life with wisdom and strength. Our new community thrives with honest leadership, transparent finances, and genuine services that justify member investments. Property values have increased 20% since Jennifer's removal. But the fight continues. Agent Santos contacted me about another fake HOA targeting veteran families in Oklahoma. Apparently, my expertise in recognizing fraudulent communities is needed again. Sarah's voice whispers through autumn leaves. Gerald, you turned our greatest trial into victory for hundreds of families. That's the legacy we wanted to build together.
Thanks for hanging out with us on HOA Stories, where the HOA Karens meet their match. If this story had you cheering or cringing, go ahead and like the video, drop a comment with your reaction, and hit subscribe so you're ready for the next wild HOA tale.